waste. I think in a lot of countries they have that. Some countries they don't. It mentioned Nigeria, a pharmaceutical company. There's no restrictions about dumping pharmaceutical waste. So a pharmaceutical company can go ahead and do that in Nigeria and not uh, get into trouble from the country, from the government. Yet, is that ethical? Probably not, right? Just because there's laws and different things, or no laws, we just need to be aware of that. So just kind of the progression here. Again, we'll go through it. These are, when we talk about, personal selling anything, really, there's the production, there's the sales, there's the marketing, and then the more advanced thing is the partnering, right? And we'll talk about that, and that's really where we want to get to as a successful salesperson, as a successful person overall. So ethical selling, you can kind of go through this quickly. If you look here, what does it mean to not be ethical? Well, you're trying to manipulate people, right? Um, you're trying to take away the buyer's choice unfairly. So that's pretty unethical, right? There's a big difference between manipulating and persuading. Persuading is influencing the buyer based on the what the buyer wants, based on some of the benefits your product or service has. And so if you're good at persuading and you do it in a ethical way, there's no manipulation there. Okay? So that's kind of the difference there that the book points out. And you can kind of see this factors affecting ethical behavior of a salesperson. So we may have certain goals. We may have a sales target we need to hit. We may want to make a certain amount of money by a certain time. And so that can affect our behavior, right? If all of a sudden at the end of the month we're $1,000 short of where we need to be, maybe we'll push a little harder for the sale. Maybe we'll say something that's not totally true to get the sale. Think about that. The customer has goals, the company has goals, the company has policies. So they may give you a high sales quota. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make 10% this month increase in sales. That's a lot. And so if you kind of think about, hey, what does that look like? 10%, I may have to sell 4 more customers. And that takes time. So you're weighing up against some of these other kinds of processes, some of these other kinds of policies. And like I said, if this is kind of the big picture, the laws, your personal goals, all these impact your behavior. The next chapter, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth, talks about consumer buying behavior. This kind of feeds into that. So I just kind of want to go through this a little bit with you just to show you how that works. All right. So questions for ourselves that we can ask about anything we're doing, not just sales. Kind of like checking in. Remember last week at the end we talked about emotional intelligence, and we talked about we need to know where we're at emotionally, right? If we're irritable and we go into a sales call, we may not be effective. If we're feeling tired, drained, overwhelmed, we're not going to be that successful in talking to our boss, talking to our colleagues, and persuading them to adopt whatever it is we're trying to get them to use. So we need to be aware of some of these kinds of things. And this is a good place to look at question-wise. Think about this. Would I be embarrassed if my customer found out about a behavior I'm doing, right? You could tune it into how would your family respond to what you're doing? Would my supervisor approve of my behavior? What do most salespeople do? If other salespeople feel this is an accepted behavior, is that okay? And you just kind of look, would I be upset? And this is a big one. This is a really good one. If a salesperson did to me what I'm trying to do to them, in the way of communicating. Would I be upset with that? Just kind of think about that. And it kind of puts us into this frame of mind of, and it's gray area, right? I think last week a few people said, there's a lot of kind of, you know, gray area boundaries. It's kind of flows in one. It's not a perfect science, right? Sometimes it's ethical, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's in between. So there are times we make decisions based on that, and sometimes we make decisions that we think are great, and another person thinks, well, that's not ethical. Maybe you raised your prices. I was just reading about the car manufacturer Tesla, and they actually lowered their prices by something like 10% on a lot of their base models and a lot of their medium models. And so what happened, you would think that would be great. Wow, they're lowering prices by maybe $10,000. You would think customers would be happy. Well, customers were very upset. So this week, about 10,000 customers who already bought a Tesla at the higher price sent a petition into Tesla to say, what are you doing? I'm paying more money than the person that bought it this particular day, a month later. And so they got upset. Is that ethical? Can a customer get upset? Of course they can. Can the company lower a price? Of course. But Elon Musk and Tesla has to kind of think about, okay, what are the ramifications if I lower the price substantially? What does that do to my existing customers? How do they feel? So these are questions we need to kind of ask when we think about things. It's not just raising prices. It can happen when we're lowering prices, when we're making more accommodations. If I allow a customer, I'll give you a personal example for myself. Again, some of the coaching that I do, I have a package where somebody will buy a number of coaching sessions with me over a period of time. And somebody didn't want to buy the package. They said, can I just buy one at a time? And I don't normally do that. But if I did that, and for one customer, would that be fair to the other ones that have to buy 8 sessions? And just kind of think about that. So for me, ethically, I said, no, that's not fair. I wouldn't do that. So I had to turn away a potential customer because I wouldn't change my way that I charge for my service. So it really gets you kind of thinking about there's a lot of gray areas, like I said. So again, family and friends, what might be the consequences of your behavior? That's really a good one to kind of think about. Is it helpful for society if I engage in this behavior? I mean, hopefully, we get to the point where we kind of see, we have the awareness to know, am I making a pretty good sound decision here in terms of how I'm communicating about my consulting, about my product, about my service, about the work that I'm doing, and whatever it is I'm trying to get somebody to buy into, a product, an idea, whatever that might be. So terminology here, again, manipulating things that are unethical when we're telling half-truths, right? Do we use deception? And think about times that we've been sold or we've been told some ideas, they give us half the truth, right? They tell us, you can get this product and it will do X, but they don't say, well, it will only last you 2 months. And then you have to rebuy the service again, right? Bribes, kickbacks. I mean, we kind of know what those are, right? But think about this. Could be kind of subtle. So my mom was in sales for many years, and she would always around the holiday time bring extra like treats for her customers, candies, uh, gift cards for a restaurant, various things like that. Now, that's not considered a bribe, that's considered service. But what if, and she didn't do this, but what if all of a sudden there was a new customer that potentially could buy a big order? Okay, so we're talking about kickbacks here. And so they said, well, you know what? If we like your candies and your gift cards, we'll give you this big order, but we want 10 gift cards to this restaurant. Is that ethical? It's kind of a payment made to a buyer based on placing an order, right? So you can kind of see how this can kind of get fuzzy, where it's not very clear about what is a kickback. Now, bribes happen all the time in governments in terms of, companies trying to you kind of think about governments, companies trying to persuade a government not to follow through with a particular regulation. So bribes happen a lot. They make a payment or they take somebody out to a very fancy dinner and in a Caribbean island, okay? They fly them out there. Is that a bribe? To influence their decision. And maybe it's not a purchase decision. Maybe it's a decision that don't pass this regulation because that will limit my company's business, right? So it gets to be really difficult sometimes to understand the fine line between what's ethical and what's not. Okay, but again, think about this special treatment. Like I said, thinking within the company, do they treat certain salespeople better than others? Is that ethical? They're top performing salespeople. When I sold in college textbooks for a number of years in higher education, we have 100 or more salespeople, sometimes a couple hundred. And so what they would do is for the top performers, the top 10%, they would take them and think about this. Is this ethical? Based on your performance. So those that did really well, they would fly us to a very nice place, went to Mexico, went to various places. And so the top 10% of the salespeople got special treatment because they performed. Is that ethical? Or is that a way to enhance performance? And kind of think about it. Some people might say that's not ethical. Well, they had, a better opportunity to get to that higher level because the territory I had, a lot of the people left in the territory, the customers, and I had to mop up, I had to clean up a lot of mess from the last person. So you can kind of see where, that might impact you. And then think about this reputation, right? We want a good reputation. We want to be known as a particular kind of person when we're dealing with colleagues in our company. They don't want to look to us as like untrustworthy, right? They don't want to, well, we don't want them to look at us as untrustworthy or as the person that always complains, right? So it's not just selling here, but you can kind of see where ethics is critical in how we're behaving. Okay. So this is kind of misconceptions in a sense, what buyers hate about salespeople. But think about this when we're being sold to, what do we dislike about particular things? Like somebody's exaggerating the benefits. Oh, these vitamins will give you all this energy and you'll feel amazing. Okay, and reduce your inflammation. If you're taking this particular vitamin and you feel arthritis, it will help with your arthritis. You take it, does nothing, right? Is that exaggeration based on somebody's claim you saw over the internet? Happens all the time. So lying about the product availability. Oh, yeah, the new models of that car will be out next month. And what happens? It's 6 months and they're still not out, but you put a down payment of $1,000 on that new car. We would hate somebody to do that, right? Misrepresenting guarantees. Well, think about this. You have a 2-year guarantee, and then, on your washing machine. And then all of a sudden it breaks after 15 months. You call the company and they say, you know what? We do guarantee that, but it does not cover any of the labor. It only covers the parts. So you still have to pay for a service person to come to your house $200. And you're like, what are you talking about? I thought you guaranteed it for 2 years of service. No, well, yes, for parts, but not for the labor. So you can kind of see how we might not be so thrilled with the product we bought. Think about things you've bought and how they perform. And when people not necessarily lie about it, but they misrepresent it. And so we just need to be aware if we're in sales, if we're going into sales, if we are in a company dealing with potential salespeople, just kind of start to think about these things. What kind of makes us uncomfortable and why? And then there's obviously a reason why, right? Another thing is, if we're answering questions and we have no idea what the answer is, right? We kind of talked about this in our first class, if you remember. It was brought up, you know, about you're a salesperson and you don't know everything about your product or your service. So some people said that, hopefully, you do know enough so you could present yourself to the potential buyer that you know what you're talking about. But sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I don't have that answer for you, but in 24 hours, I will talk to my tech team and we'll get that answer back for you, right? So just kind of think about, do we ever say we know the answer when we don't, or kind of know the answer, right? And what might that do? How might the other person respond, right? So selling hazardous products. Of course, I go to the US Postal Service to mail a package. Every time I go there, they're always asking me, do you have anything hazardous, liquid, flammable, um, aerosol, things that you can't ship? Because obviously they don't want to ship that. But a lot of people ship those products secretly. Um, and so because they're selling them to somebody and they ship them in a particular way, they have to get them to their customer. Well, there's certain ways to do it ethically that are not hazardous, and other ways that are. Maybe you read this article or this news story recently, just a few days ago in Australia. They were driving a piece of equipment from Perth, 900 kilometers, to a repair facility. This particular piece of equipment was radioactive, and they didn't know until they made the entire journey a week or two later that part of the equipment, a piece of the equipment that was radioactive, fell off the truck. It's somewhere in the 900-kilometer radius, and they have no idea. So, very hazardous product. They were even servicing. They weren't even selling, they were servicing. Now the kinds of hunt that they have to do to find this, because this particular thing that fell off the equipment could make somebody very sick, and they wouldn't know what it was. It was just a piece of equipment. So, wow, there's a lot of potentials about things that we need to think about, ethics. All right. So how do we handle, this is interesting, expense accounts, right? Um, think about this. If you're working at a company, and I know a lot of us are remote, but if we're in an office, is it okay they provide supplies, right? They provide pens and paper. Is it okay to use some of their products, the pens and paper, and maybe a stapler, and bring it home and use it at your home? Is that okay? Is it ethical? A lot of people do it. Is that okay? Right? Um, so just kind of start thinking about it from the standpoint of most salespeople have an expense account. Now, say cover legitimate expenses for travel. I remember one of my first jobs. If you remember, I was selling the coatings for hardwood floors, the clear finishes. And I had a great day, had a really large sale. So what did I do? I went out and had a nice dinner. I was traveling by myself. I went to a steak restaurant when I was eating steak, and it was expensive at the time. I think it was like $30 for the entire meal. And I got a note back from my boss saying, "Congratulations on the sale. Watch the expenses, please, next time." Okay. So was that ethical? I was excited. I made a big sale. I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a fancy dinner by myself. And people noticed that. So I was the next time. And since then, this was, goodness gracious, um, 25 years ago, or yeah, about, I still remember it. I'm still very careful when I'm purchasing something, especially if I'm on the company expense account. Now, I work for myself now, so it's a little different. So I really pay attention to when I'm traveling. If I'm billing a customer for the lunch, I'm not going to go out and have a huge lunch. I'm going to have a normal lunch, salad, like I would normally do, and just take that into account. Okay, so that's kind of the piece there. Um, all right, so think about this if we were to switch jobs. Okay, this happens a lot. You leave your company. Should a salesperson give, or you're leaving your company and you're in consulting, right? You're an engineer. How much time do you give for your company to transition to a new salesperson, to a new person? Do we give them 2 weeks notice, a week notice? Many companies just kind of like go to the point where they're going to lay you off. They send you an email, or you get a phone call or text message, or boss tells you, you know what, they're laying your division off. They give you 3 weeks notice. Sometimes they give you a week notice. So ethically, what is the right thing to do? Again, there's no right way, exact science to this, but kind of think about these things. You know, if you're leaving the company, okay, this is kind of a funny story I'll share with you. So when I was selling in the college textbook business, one of the salespeople that was in my territory with my company kind of he had a little bit different territory. He sold different subject areas, but he was in the same area. He wasn't doing very well. The management decided they're going to let him go. Okay. After about a year or so, he was not very happy. What did he do? Well, college textbooks, at least at the time, the physical books were expensive. And you could go to a wholesaler. Again, we talked a little bit about that, the middleman, and sell books to this middle person who would then sell it to the student at a discount. But how did the wholesaler get his books? He would buy up books from different people. Not the bookstore, but a person that would just be like you or I, gathering books from students. Well, this particular salesperson had all these desk copies, these instructor copies that he got for free to give to a professor, so they might look at and use in the course. He had hundreds of books at his house. What did he do? He sold those. He called one of those book wholesalers and made a lot of money, literally, because I was sent to his house to get his books and pick up his car. My boss said, "Can you go there and do that?" So I did that. I'm like, "Where are all the books?" He's like, "Oh, I didn't get any." So imagine that. He probably made, I don't know, at the time, $500, $1,000. People do things like that, right? Hopefully it doesn't impact how we are, you know, looking at ourselves. But think about this. I mean, like I said, do we take a pen from somebody else and use it? Is that a big deal? Probably not. So, false claims, right? So, think about reputation. Think about representing your company and the products and the service that you provide in a good way. And that's what it takes. If you want to have a good relationship with your customer, and then think about this relationship with competitors. So sometimes salespeople, this happens in very many businesses, and I was also reading this about this too. There is something called a non-compete clause. You may have heard about some of that. You go to a company and you have expertise. They're hiring you. They want to hire you either in sales or marketing or to do something, consulting. And they say, well, we're going to hire you, but you cannot go to a competitor for 6 months if you leave our company, because they want to make sure they're protecting their products and services. They don't want you going to their company, taking all their trade secrets, and then going to competitor, because that could be really bad for them. But it happens, right? Um, think about this. If you're a salesperson and you start talking bad about your competitor and their products, oh, you know what? That product, it's terrible, you know, terrible service. Is that something that we need to be engaged with? Now, it's okay to know, and I always, this was a rule of thumb in sales that I always like to use. I always spoke to the strengths of my product or my service, especially knowing where the weaknesses were the competition. Okay, that's a good salesperson. But I wouldn't all of a sudden start saying all the bad things about the salesperson. Oh, they're not reliable. They don't service their product well. I would talk more about, you know what? I service my customers really well. I give them 24 hours within, they ask me a question, within 24 hours, I get back to them, knowing full well my competitor doesn't do that. But I highlight my strengths rather than, highlight the weaknesses of the competitor. And some people might feel differently. Some people feel that might be okay. But that's just kind of how I've gone about being in sales for so many years. So this is just to give you an idea. In the United States, they have certain guidelines and legal processes, laws. In the United States, the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, we have antitrust laws. These are regulations, okay, that are legal. Different countries have different kinds of regulations. Within the United States, there are parts of the government that are responsible for managing different laws. For instance, Securities and Exchange Commission. What's big in the news right now is cryptocurrency, FTX, right? They talk about unethical, right? Cryptocurrency. I don't know if anybody here has any. I do not. My wife is in banking, and she was always kind of never so sold on that particular method of payment. A lot of people are okay with that. FTX goes in, does business for a number of years. All of a sudden, they're billions, tens of billions of dollars short, and the customers are out the money, right? Now, we have a trade commission, the SEC, but they don't regulate cryptocurrency. So after the fact, a lot of people got taken. And so it becomes a big deal. In your country, do they have a food and drug regulation government agency to make sure that the foods people get and the drugs are safe? That's just an example of some of these, how they impact in the United States and everywhere else. So I'm going to skip through that. I just love this word, sales puffery, right? Exaggerated claims. And so, do we make false claims? Well, in certain countries, it's against the law to do that. In the United States, it is. In Canada, it's against the law to make certain claims of advertising that are not understood by a reasonable person. So you can't do that. Then a company is liable for damages, right? So certain countries may have no laws about behavior, but this is where it gets back into the ethics of it. Is it okay for you to do it even though your country doesn't have a law? What's the right thing to do? There's no right and wrong. It's like, what's right for you as a person? And will you work for a company that engages in these kinds of practices? Right? There were things that my company did I didn't appreciate. Trying to, as companies go, you're a salesperson, you're trying to close the end of year really well. So whether it's a calendar year through December 31st or a fiscal year, which could be kind of in the middle of the year, but it's for a 12-month period, they would tell us, okay, can you get more orders pushed in from next year into this year to boost the numbers? My company promoted that. My company allowed customers to get free shipping if they gave an order in by December 31st, or if it was shipped before the end of the year, to promote more sales. Is that ethical? I didn't particularly like it, but it was we'll call it, that was kind of the structure of my company. Because if they did that one year, they took sales from next year and brought it into this year before the year ended. If they did not do that again the next year, well, then they would be behind in sales. So it became this vicious cycle. The legal business practice, I don't know. My company said it was good to do. I had no choice because I was graded. My sales manager, the sales management team set up goals based on bringing in extra business by the end of the year. We would get extra money. So they would reward us for doing that. This is real life stuff, everybody. And as much as we talk about ethics, as much as we talk about that, doesn't always happen that way, right? So let me just talk a little bit here. Finish up here. Okay, the last thing I kind of want to share with you in this segment, and then we'll take a we'll go for a little bit. We'll jump into the next chapter, which is buying behavior. International ethics and legal issues. Again, just kind of think about what you're faced with, where you're at in terms of the government, in terms of companies, in terms of those that sell to you, those you sell to others. So different kinds of things are set up in different ways. And just because it's legal may not mean it's ethical, right? If there's no laws against it. So, like I said, just kind of think about that. So, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think some of this is common sense, but some of it is how do we deal with a company like I was working for that says you need to work in this way that you don't think is ethical? And do we tell anybody? There's another thing. I'm going to stop the share just for a moment here. Um, so, well, I'll just leave that up for just a second. Think about this. If you're working with another salesperson in your company and they're doing something that's unethical, and you're going about your business in a very responsible way, and maybe you're not in sales per se, maybe you're in consulting, maybe you're in the hotel industry, maybe you're in software consulting, maybe you're in engineering, but you notice an employee in your company is misrepresenting something to a customer. Is it up to you to say something to that employee? Or do you look the other way? Or do we just like kind of ignore it? Or do we engage with that? So this is all, like I said, ethics and legalities, and in terms of sales, it's almost all gray area when it becomes us interacting with somebody that's doing something that may be unethical. What do we do with them? Do we tell our boss, you know what? Um, do we go right to that person? They might just say, you know what, I don't care. What responsibility do we have in that situation? So that's what it's about. All right. So good. So let me move along a little bit here. And we're going to share and start into this next chapter. I am watching the time, so we will take a little bit of a break at the top of the hour, okay? Maybe a few minutes before. So we'll go for 1 hour, take a break, and then probably spend another 40 minutes on this chapter because, again, I know we missed a lot of time here. This this particular chapter and those that we go into from now on are what I call, from a sales standpoint, my view, um, much more relevant to everyday interactions, much more, I'll even say, interesting when we're dealing with the field of selling and the selling process and selling in between within a company or a manufacturer. This whole chapter is about buying behavior, which is great. Consumer behavior is kind of the next step. Some of you are taking organizational behavior right now, or maybe later on. So that is the behavior within an organization. This is kind of related to that because it's behavior, though, for the buyer and the seller. So think about this. Different types of customers, obviously, different ways we make purchase decisions. Who is involved in the decision making? This is important to know. If you're a good salesperson, if you're trying to get a new job and you're interviewing with somebody that does not make the hiring decision, but they're an intermediary, and they then gather up the notes and give that to the hiring manager, will you be as effective in trying to get that job and talking to that person that doesn't make the decision. You could be. That's a different kind of sale. So think about that. Um, and what, should we as salespeople, again, I'll use this word interchangeably, communicators, how do we communicate differently in different buying situations? That's important. If you're skilled at selling, you're skilled at communicating. If you're skilled at communicating, you're able to adapt your style based on the situation. Okay. We'll talk about that in this chapter. That's really high level skill. That's exciting. In terms of organizational buying, too, you think about this, your company's buying things. How will these impact the salespeople? Your company's buying new software. Hopefully, they're not buying Microsoft Teams, because that's what we're using here. And you can see how difficult it was for me to get on. There's security protocols, and we weren't doing exactly what needed to be done. Goodness gracious. It was authenticating me as the person that was teaching this course. And I get it, but they didn't make it very easy to do. So if you're a salesperson for a large company and they bring in a new, we'll call this, and we'll talk about this at another later date, customer relationship management system. How do you track your customers? How do you track their behaviors? How do you track your sales calls? They call it CRM, customer relationship management, right? If they bring in a new CRM system and it is really difficult to use, and all the company's salespeople are disgusted with it, how will that impact your view of the company? How will that impact how you sell to the customers if the system you're using is very difficult? I've had that happen a few times. Being in sales, one of the big companies that has the software is salesforce.com. And Salesforce is pretty intuitive, pretty easy to use, tracking your customers, tracking your behavior and how you're doing, and your sales and your potential prospects and all that. But there are times when things are very difficult to use, right? Or they'll make a change in software and it messes up what you were working on. How does that impact you as a salesperson? So there's lots of levels to this. We think about buying decisions. The company buying stuff impacts employees. Again, don't have to be in sales to kind of see what might result from here. Buying decision for a family. You're a parent. You're trying to buy something for your household. Maybe your kids don't like it, right? Maybe they do. Internet service. My goodness, there's could be a very difficult conversation. Is your internet service provider reliable, right? My kids, if we didn't have something reliable and they were online and it kept dropping out, the connection, this company stinks. We need to switch. Dad, why did you buy into this service? And so got that a lot, right? They would blame me, the parent, if it didn't work because I made the buying decision. Think about that. So responsibilities, it's not, again, just salespeople. We deal with these behaviors every day as a family, as a friend, purchasing decisions we make all the time. All right. We talked about this before, types of customers. So within the buying behavior, it's important to kind of understand the different kinds of customers because this sets up the different buying situations, right? Selling to a manufacturer, selling to a reseller, a government agency, an institution, or the direct customer. These are all different kinds of customers. An institution could be the regulation arm of a government. An institution could be a association of plumbers. There could be an association of a national association of electrical workers. And so your customer are those institutions. Maybe you sell to the government. Maybe you're a reseller. You buy products and you sell to another store. And so you're the intermediary, you're the wholesaler. So there's lots of places to kind of think about. If I'm here and I'm engaged in this, how does that impact how I'm selling? How does it impact how the customer is buying? And how do I need to change my method of communication, the way I sell, based on these places? I've sold my service to governments. Governments, a lot of times, like a local government, have budgets and they have to bid things out. Like if I'm working for a school system and I'm selling my service, well, I can't charge the same amount. Again, talk about ethics, right? I can't charge the same amount for work I do at a company that sometimes I do as a government, even if it's identical work, because the government bids on things and they only accept the lowest bid. So I have to change how I'm doing things, knowing if I want to sell in a school or a government, I might have to lower my rates. Remember I said at the beginning, at an end user customer level, somebody wasn't willing to buy a package of coaching services. They wanted to buy one at a time, and I wouldn't do that. But then it gets into, if I'm selling into a different type of customer, I do have to adapt to it, or I just don't sell into that area, right? So think about, from your standpoint, how you engage differently with different kinds of customers. So we'll get into a few of these, then we'll take a break here. If you're a manufacturer, think about this. Buyers working for manufacturers are involved in different kinds of situations. So the manufacturer, buying products that are included in the products the company is manufacturing. So for instance, we're buying products and services that support the manufacturing operation. A while back, I think I mentioned that one of my friends is in sales, and he sells the machines that cut granite for buildings or kitchens, or whoever is using granite for countertops or tile. And so he sells the machines and he sells the service. Now, they are a manufacturer of those machines. That's what they sell. So they sell that and the service to a particular customer. They wouldn't sell it to me and my homeowner, because I wouldn't be spending $100,000 or more for that type of equipment. So they have a very different kind of process that they sell to. And the behavior of those buyers, that's a big ticket item. It takes longer to sell that than it would if I'm buying a pair of pants at a store, right? Although that might take a while too, if you're very picky. You might know people that are very picky on the clothes they buy. I'm not as picky, but I do like nice things and nice things to fit me well. All right, but you can kind of see in manufacturing here. Some are original equipment, meaning that these purchase goods to make their products, and some are the end users, manufacturers who buy goods and services to support. So here would be, I'm a manufacturer of parts for an airplane. My customer is Boeing and Airbus, okay, and all the other smaller makes of jet planes. And so for me, I don't sell, I sell directly to Boeing because they need the parts. And I manufacture we'll call it the ball bearings or the screws that support the wings, right? There's lots of manufacturers, and they may only deal with one type of customer. They might not, those same screws, they could be sold to to support boats, but maybe they only call on the airplanes. Maybe they have another salesperson in that company that calls on the ships and the boating industry. And maybe then there's another salesperson in that company that calls on the automobiles and the trucks. So you see how that works? I mean, you could be a manufacturer. If you're selling in that business, it gets very specific. So to be successful in this business, you have to find, we'll talk about this a little bit later, your niche, the particular place that you're going to target your business to sell. All right. And if you kind of think about this, I like this little graphic that was in the book too. You can make a major purchase, right? Or a minor purchase. Major purchases, like I said, machine tools, granite etching equipment, computer mainframes for a company. Or you could be selling the paper towels in your company washroom. Think about that. Or you could be selling the service to support a company, the cleaning service, the transportation, the internet, all those pieces. So the way buying situations happen, you have to think about who is my end user, where are they at, who would I like to be able to support and sell, and how does that relate to all these other areas. So as we go through this, you'll kind of see that the opportunity to be in sales, the opportunity to sell in sales is pretty much unlimited. I mean, there's so many businesses, there's so many ways to sell. And now we have everything sold over the internet, right? Online. Changes everything within that, but you still need the infrastructure to support it. You still need manufacturers, right? To be able to teach this course, think about all the things we need to have. The electricity. We need to have the people that make the screens that we're watching it on, the computers, right? The internet support, the companies that make the PowerPoint slides, the textbook, right? All those pieces that go into that, right? Windsor University, the university that runs this course, right? So you could say almost like Windsor is, in a sense, kind of a reseller in a way. They're a university. All universities, in a way, are. They're selling content of courses that have come from publishers like the books or from professors like myself, and they hire us to teach, and you buy into the degree of an MBA, the degree of a doctorate, the degree of a college education. So in essence, Windsor is like a reseller, right? So you think about that. So service. So we're engaged in sales right now. You were. It doesn't. Wouldn't call it selling, right? But in essence, it kind of is, right? So we're doing this all the time. So think about in terms of a reseller. You have a product, you have a service. It's important to kind of know some of these terms like profit margin. How much are we making, right? If we continually sell a product for more than it cost us to produce it, we'll have a profit based on taking apart all the expenses. But if our cost to make a product is higher than the money we're making from it, it's probably not a good business. Unless we'll talk about this later, buying behavior, we're using a product, and stores do this all the time. They're called loss leaders. A loss leader is a product. You go to a department store, you go to any store, they have products they sell at a deep discount to get you in the door so that you'll spend more money on those things that are not discounted. Loss leaders. So there's specific buying behavior within that. This is why you kind of see I'm getting more excited, because this is kind of the real underpinnings of sales, the real underpinnings of how we interact with people and the communication. Understanding the behavior is really important. Okay. So Government agencies, again, we'll go through this. And let's say we will take a break in 5 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break in 5 minutes, and then we'll go for another probably 40 minutes or so. All right. Again, take into account that we missed the first 50 some odd minutes. All right, government agencies. I talked about this a little while ago. Contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder. So I was working for a government agency. They were part of the Health and Human Services for a city in my area. They wanted to do a training for their employees on stress management. They reached out to me and said, could you make a proposal? And I know they also said they have a particular budget, right? Government agency. Now, they wouldn't tell me exactly how much money they had. They gave me a range, right? And everybody that sold into that government agency had to be within that range or they couldn't use your service, right? But it's not just about the money, right? So you kind of think about the service within what you're providing, because you could be on the higher end of that contract, but provide a better service, a better value to the government. And so, yes, I priced it well, but they also knew I would have a good service, product, information for them. So they hired me. If I was selling that same program to a for-profit company, my fee would be higher. But again, you have to know where you're selling into, the who is the buyer, right? And selling into a government might take a very long period of time, whereas selling into a company might be much shorter. Selling a specific one customer directly might be 5 minutes, right? So the times change and the resources change as you're looking at who you're selling to. Institutions and customers, think about this: public and private institutions, hospitals, churches, colleges, right? If you're selling your service, mental health services, to a college, which is a big business right now, online mental health services to colleges is huge business. Okay. So how do you support that? Well, you need you need salespeople that go to the college, that talk to the administrators of the college, that you have this service. And imagine that. How is that you have a billing service that you go to a hospital? How about selling into a church or a mosque or somewhere to support their record keeping or security, right? So again, based on your customer, where they're at, a manufacturer, reseller, government institution, or a customer, changes how we're going to sell, changes the kinds of ways we could communicate, changes the resources that we're going to need to be able to sell in those marketplaces. So that's a great place to leave it for the moment. Let's take 10 minutes. So we're at the top of the hour. So at 10 past, come back. Hopefully, well, I know there's some places in India I know that are like 9.5 hour difference from me. So maybe you're not at the top of the hour, but maybe you're at the bottom. But within 10 minutes or so, please come back. Let's take a break, stretch, get some food, get some water, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to, and we'll come back and pick it up in 10 minutes. All right? So like I said, I'm going to leave the connection going, and we'll come back in a few minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. We got give another minute here. So I did say 10 after the hour. So All right, I think I'm going to get started here. Like I said, we are going to go to uh, probably another 35 minutes, um, maybe 40 total, and then we'll be done. Okay. Again, keeping in mind that we missed the first 50 minutes or so, but I guess that this was a good time to have a problem logging in, because the first unit we talked about, ethics, um, even though it pertains to us quite a bit, it's not as detailed subject matter as the buying process is, and this. Um, all right, so let's talk a little bit about. We kind of referred to this too, right? It's pretty complex, this buying process of an organization. Um, if you're an organization, if you're a business, and you're selling to a business to business selling, it's larger, more complex than if we're selling to the end user customer, right? Makes sense. They have many different departments of a company, right? Many different employees, layers of decision making. So selling to a business, at one point, like I said, I was selling the varnish, the stains, the coatings for hardwood floors. I had some stores that sold directly to the customer. I had some manufacturers, kind of resellers, that would sell to people that were contractors that would go into the homes and do the floors. And I would sell to businesses that would want the service of, I knew that they were putting in a lot of hardwood floors at this place of business. So I would help some of my sort of customers, um, the ones that I sold that to get them business. Oh, there's a new business going in here. They're going to put in all hardwood floors. You're the company that I sell that uses the products. Here's the potential, and you go and try to sell to them. So pretty complex. So, highly trained, knowledgeable, of course. There's lots of people you need to sell into. I would sell into a business, a hardware store, one owner, or I would sell into the buyer of a chain of stores. They had 100 stores, and I had to sell to this buyer. They were called a purchasing agent, a buyer. So if I did a good job selling them, they would bring my product into all 100 of their stores. One sale, and I get into 100 stores. That's pretty cool. That takes a year or two relationship building. And I not only had to sell to them, but they had an associate. And then they had regulations about, okay, if you're going to sell to us, we need to be able to have a special payment terms. We don't pay for them right away. We need 120 days to pay our bills. So you're negotiating lots of different things. Lots of complexity in terms of the selling. As you increase the amount of customers you're selling to, and it becomes global, that becomes, more substantial, complex. And think about this global sourcing. Where are we getting our products from? I have some friends that they would sell, you might know these, like they're called premium items. So this is big, like a salesperson or a place of business gives like keychains or magnets or pens or a pad of paper with a calendar on it that has the magnet that you put on your refrigerator that advertises the business. Those are called premium items. And they sold those to pretty much anybody that wanted to buy them. It could be an end user, but a lot of times it's to a business So businesses like to have these things to give to employees, coffee mugs. Um, I don't know how many people are using a mouse on their computer, but like the track pads, the little pads, um, they would sell those. They would customize those with the employee um, of the week or the logo of the company. And so there's lots of pieces to this buying process that you can sell. So just kind of start again thinking about this. All speaks to there's tons of opportunity, but with the opportunity, there's tons of skill you will need to acquire to be good at selling into these particular areas. All right. So talk about some of those skills. Sales, like we talk about original equipment manufacturers or resellers. Um, you need to obviously create demand, right? So if you're selling into an organization, you need to there needs to be some demand for your product, right? Now, you could be the greatest salesperson in the world and selling a particular product, but if the company you're selling to doesn't need it, then they're not going to buy from you, right? So sometimes our goal is to drive the demand, right? We need to drive the demand within our customers. You have a new product you want to sell. You've sold them existing products before. They like what they sold. Give you an example again in the hardwood flooring industry. So we would have clear finishes we would sell to the hardware stores. And then we would come out with new products. This is a professional grade, heavy duty coating for your floor. So if you have a big family with a lot of pets, or if you sell into a bar where there's a lot of people walking into and using the floor, or maybe a dance studio where they're beating on the floor, or to gymnasiums at schools, they take a lot of wear and tear. This particular coating, well, it sells for 3 times the price of the consumer one, but it's 6 times the durable. It's 6 times as durable. So you need to drive demand. That product will not sell to the end user customer, but you have to sometimes go to the place where it's going to sell most to. And so that becomes then your ability, we'll talk about this in a later class, to prospect, to find out who are your target customers. So there are steps in this process, and it's kind of always good to kind of start thinking about when we are buying, when a customer that we're going to potentially sell is buying, we need to kind of think about what's going to go on in their head, how they're going to buy my product, especially if it's somebody and it's a service or a product that's going to take a longer time. So they have 8 steps here. Some of these kind of merge into the next step. Sometimes you can skip a step, sometimes. But these are kind of general steps you kind of think about, okay? The first one we talked about, recognizing that there is a need. You have to drive the demand for your product. So they have to know, and this is your job as a seller sometimes, they have a need, right? They may not know they have a need. You got a great product. If they don't realize they have a need, you have a great product, they're not going to buy it. So part of the job as a seller is to get the buyer to recognize that they need something. You're solving a problem that they have, or you're solving a potential problem they might have. Then you need to kind of think about this. What does your product, the type of product that they need, right? They have something they need. What within your products or services or consulting do they need? They're going to be thinking about that. All right. And then it comes into, they're going to want to know specific information, specifications about your service. Are you reliable? Can I count on you if I have a problem with my software? How quickly will you get back to me? All these things. So you have to develop the, and this is where you start answering their questions. You have to, so you know they're going to have questions, detailed questions. So you need to be aware of that. And then sometimes, if you are the buyer, right, from their standpoint, they're going to search for multiple suppliers of their product. So unless you're the only one in the business in the world that has that product, they're probably going to talk to other people, your competitors. So know that. And again, if you know your competitors, say you're in a consulting business and you sell consulting to attorneys, to lawyers, that's your business. You were a former attorney, you were a lawyer yourself, and you work with other attorneys in terms of how to grow their business as an attorney, right? That could be a good service. You provide a good there. But there could be, another person that was an attorney in another city that does the same kind of business. And they're good at what they do. So are you. But this particular person is going to look at, probably, if they're doing their due diligence, if they're looking at potential, they're going to be spending a lot of money. Well, they want to make sure they got the right product or service for their company. They're going to talk to multiple people. So know that. And then you can kind of think through that process in your head about how the buyer is going to be, right? So they're going to get proposals. The buyer wants you to pitch them a deal. Okay, if I'm going to hire you to be my consultant for the year, give me a proposal. And hopefully you have all the information you need. And again, knowing that they're going to be a competitor. This happens to me. A lot of times I'm selling my service to a private school. And they're not only talking to me, but they're talking to 3 other people. So I have to put together a proposal of my consulting service. And hopefully I've addressed all their issues, right? What's the next step? They evaluate them. They sit down, the buyer sits down with, it could be multiple buyers or some of the other stakeholders. They're going to evaluate the proposals and they're going to pick a supplier, pick somebody that will service them, product, service, consulting, whatever it is. Okay, so that's it. That's great. They evaluate, then hopefully they come back to you and say, you know what, Professor Corbin, we're going to use your service. Elena, we're going to use your service at our hotel. All right. And so hopefully then they give you the order, right? And so for them, then that's not the end of it. Then they're going to evaluate how you're doing. They're going to evaluate your service. And so absolutely, these steps are critical. And it's important when you kind of think about, I'm the buyer, I'm the seller. It doesn't matter in a sense, because you need to understand, especially if you're the seller, you need to put yourself in the buyer's place. This is kind of the steps they go through. Like sometimes they merge some of these in, like they're analyzing and evaluating while they're searching for suppliers at the same time. Steps 4 and 6, they do at the same time, right? Or they're trying to figure out what they need. At the same time, they're already evaluating potential sellers. And so it becomes then just to kind of know this process, the buying behavior, the psychology of where they're going to be thinking about. Then you can position how you're going to sell and know that eventually they're going to have a question about, okay, you know what? It might be as simple as, you know what, how do I place the order, right? I want your service. When can you start? Can you start next week? Right? That would be amazing, right? But you might not get that right away. It might take you 3 months to go through these steps. It might take you a year or 2 to go through these steps. Keep that in mind too, based on selling to a government, selling into an institution, selling to consumer direct, reseller. So within these, we'll call them, I think as a good salesperson, one of the lingo in terms of selling, it's helpful to get commitments along the way, right? We'll call them, there was this old adage that they say, the more sometimes the more no's you get, that's the closer you get to a yes. But it's always good to get small commitments by your buyer. Okay, small commitments from your buyer. And so some of them, sometimes you need to make sure that you're making that available. All right. I'm going to make sure here. I just saw that. Let me see if we can shift this up here. It said my meeting is ending in 5 minutes here, and I want to make sure that we're not cut off in 5 minutes. So can I edit the timing of my meeting? May not be able to. Wow. If we're cut off in 5 minutes because Microsoft Teams locks us out, so be it. We'll continue with this next week. Knowing that potentially, I'm working on the fly here, so bear with me here. Need to make sure that this is working well. Okay. Okay, so I guess there's a potential that our meeting might cancel in 5 minutes because, like I said, we started late and we went over here. If that happens,
Professor,
let me tell you a
but
couple
usually,
things. Next week, we're also going to meet next Tuesday. Okay, so we'll have another class on Tuesday. Then we'll go back to meeting on Saturdays for a couple weeks. It's all in Microsoft Teams in the calendar. I put that in there, but I just want to remind you. Next week, we're going to be covering chapters 4, and if we need to clean up on this, we'll clean up on this. And we may get into chapter 5. Next week, also, we started getting into communication methods and presenting are the topics. And so within that, starting later next week, I'm going to have an assignment. We'll post that. There'll be 2 this semester. And the assignment will be revolving around the selling process. Give you a scenario. You're selling in this particular area. I wanted to make it very realistic for you. So I'm going to have you pick where you're selling, institution, if you're in an end user, if you're in a government, you pick it, and you're selling a particular product or service, and you're going to go through the buying process. Those 8 steps we talked about, that's going to be the assignment. All right. And so some of it you have to be creative and figure out, okay, I'm selling potentially in this, what could be the buyer's objection about the competition that I'm not servicing enough, right? So that will be kind of the scenario here. All right. So that kind of leaves us there. Like I said, if the Microsoft team meeting ends in 2 minutes because that was on the calendar, so be it. But I want to, we'll continue on as we can here. All right, creeping commitment. So when we talk to a buyer, like I said, we want to get small yeses, small commitments from them that they will be able to purchase particular things. And so the highlighted piece here, the range of alternatives narrows. So for instance, I know I'm selling to this organization, and I know my competitors are selling in. There's 3 of them. And based on the questions I'm asking the buyer, I'm trying to narrow the alternatives. I'm trying to get them to say, you know what, my service is very unique in this way that some of these other services don't cover. Right? I'm not bashing the other service that they don't cover it. I'm just highlighting my strengths. I do this really well. And if I get the buyer to buy into that particular, oh, yes, you know what? That is very important to me, that we get somebody that can service us starting next week, because I know I could do that, or I could put together a program for the school um, during the summer. Not everybody can do programs over the summer because they go on vacation. But you know what? I'm available in June. You need me for a week to train your teachers, I can do it. And so what I've done is I've gotten a little bit of commitment. Wow, that's great that you can do, that. Now everybody does the same kind of service I provide, but they can't, knowing, provide the service in June when they need it. So that allows me to get a yes, and it might allow me to get an early, the book loves this word procurement, but it all basically is an early decision that says, yes, I'll use your service. And so wouldn't that be great if early in the process they decide, you know what, I can use your product or service. So that's kind of what we're going for here. All right. Um, Types of buying decisions. Kind of think about this. This is interesting, like a new task, right? A customer is purchasing a product or service for the first time, right? Brand new. There's a level of buying behavior within that. There's also a level that how you'll have to sell. They have no experience with your service. They have no experience with your product or your consulting. And so because of that, it's a different kind of sell. Now, if the customer is rebuying your service, like they used you for the first year, they used your products, and they're just reordering what they bought before, or you know what, you were consulting for the first year, fantastic, we want to hire you for the second year. We want your same service, or we want your same service as a modified rebuy. We want your same service, but can you add in a couple of additional workshops to our security guards at our school, because they go through a lot of stress too. So you can kind of see here, based on the buyer's decision, is it brand new? Is it a brand new service? Have they been dealing with you for a long period of time? Do they know you? And they're just rebuying. Or think about this. You go to a competitor, and this has happened to me a couple of times. I've gone to a competitor. I was hired by a competitor. So they stole me away from my current company. I'm selling to the same customers. They already have a relationship with Professor Todd. And now I'm representing a new company. So because I had a good reputation and they have a relationship with me, they're going to want to buy my product, even though it's a different company, as long as the company has good products, right? Or services. And so from that standpoint, you can kind of see how based on how you are and how you present yourself, getting back to that last section on ethics and buying behavior, if we're good and we move around, if we go to another company, if we sell a different product that might support the same customer but in a different way, and we already have a relationship with them, that's fantastic. And one of the best things is referrals. You sell a product. We talked about this, I think, in the first week. You sell a product or service. You do good work. They recommend you to their friends. They recommend you to their neighbor, to their business, to their other division within their company. You know what? You need to talk to Todd. His service is fantastic. And they come to you and say, could you help support me with this? And like, that's great. So it's them recommending, and that becomes a different sale, right? If somebody comes to me on a referral basis, they already know somebody that knows my work is good, but I might still have to sell them on what I do, the value I provide. In fact, if I'm good at what I do, I will provide and tell them and show them and share with them the value I provide, so that they're comfortable with the sale, right? All right. So I guess Microsoft Teams was okay. It wasn't going to wipe us out. Good. You never know. They couldn't let me in the beginning here. Types of decisions. Again, kind of think about this as an example, right? Consumer needs, customer needs. Could be information. Sometimes you're reducing your risk. You're giving them information. So again, if you share with them about what they need, and in a way that they know risk reduction is like you buy my product, it has a guarantee for 1 year of service. So if something goes wrong, we'll replace it for free, or we'll fix it for free, right? You buy a new automobile, usually it's 3 years and 36,000 miles. Sometimes it's more. But that helps reduce the risk of buying a major product. Same thing with a service. So think about how you could reduce risk for your buyer, if that's important. Again, think like the buyer, get in their head. This is the decision making that they have. Now, new tasks, again, you're selling them for the first time, they're going to need a lot of information. They're going to not have knowledge about you. Maybe they come to you from a referral, so they know a little bit about you, but not a lot about what you do, or long term. Again, if they're coming to you and they already come to you like the satisfied customer, there's probably not a lot that you need to do if they're just rebuying. That's like the beauty of being a good salesperson. They'll just keep coming to you for your service. You know what? You did a fantastic job consulting for my computer software. We want you for another year. Sign me up, right? That's terrific. Doesn't always work that way, but that's kind of a nice thing. So, and you can kind of see here again, in terms of the complexity. Remember, we talked about certain buying decisions are very complex within organizations, right? There might be lots of key decision makers that you have to deal with. Who is the decision maker? If it's like a brand new product or service, or if it's a straight rebuy. If it's a new task, again, probably going to take longer because that's the first time you're going to be introduced to that customer, potential customer. So there's certain steps, and you kind of see, remember that I showed you in that buying process. Sometimes you skip right over them. Again, a rebuy, it's not like they have to evaluate you again. It's not like they have to compare you. Maybe they do, but it's not like they're going to have to go through the evaluation process to see how your product is working. If it's a straight rebuy, again, they're going to give you the order, and you're going to assess how they're doing. Oh yeah, still going great, fantastic. So based on where you are in that level, product, service, consulting, even think about this. You're selling an idea within your company. Whether you're there physically or you're there remotely, you're selling an idea. Is it a brand new idea? If it's a brand new idea, it might take you more. You have to go through more steps to get them to buy into the idea. If it's a modified idea that they had already bought into, like your boss already bought into it, but now you're changing one of the specifications around it, it might take a little bit less time than a brand new idea, but still take you some time. But if you're going back to your boss and saying, you know what, we did this, remember how great it was? Can we do it again? Oh yeah, great. This idea was fantastic, go for it. So example in sales, working with my sales manager. I want to talk about expenses. I want to be able to support my customers and buy this is at a college for a very large business department, hundreds of professors. I want to be able to sponsor a lunch for the entire faculty. So that's a lot of money, more than my budget would allow for that month. I have to go to my boss and tell her and sell to her the idea, why is this important? Why do you need to provide $500 worth of food to these professors? Are they giving you enough business? Does it look like they'll help you in the future? And so from that standpoint, I'm selling her. Now, did that one time. The next year, I wanted to do it again. And now she had some history on the benefits it provided. So I still had to go in and say, you know what? Food prices have gone up. It's now going to be $550 to cater in a lunch for the department. And I'm going to do this. And she's like, okay, well, let me see if I can get the extra money into the budget. Yes, I can. Okay, you can do it again. Much easier, modified rebuy. If it was the same thing over and over again, no problem. Here's another thing. Say I wanted to do the same kind of idea at a different college. They already have history. My boss has history of, oh, Todd likes to do these things to support his customers, because there's also an opportunity during the lunch. He can show them the new products, which I did, the new books. So you make sales and make new connections that way. Oh, he's doing it at another place of business, another college. Yes, go ahead and do that. Successful. It might be very different, might not work out as well, might work out better. You don't know. But see how you can kind of think through, even you're the salesperson and you're not even selling to the end user. You have to sell to your manager, or you're an engineer and you have to sell to your boss an idea, right? You go through the same process in a sense, right? Same kind of steps. All right. So let's see here. So we're going to wrap this up in about 7 minutes. All right. Types of buying behavior you can kind of see here. We'll scroll through that. This more. All right here. This is important. People who make the buying decision. We talked a little bit about this. Are they the end user? If they are the end user, then that's a huge difference than if they're the first person who you have to sell to. Meaning that they are a person, you sell to them, they take your proposal to their management. So sometimes, again, you'll notice this, if you're not selling directly to the end user, you might have to sell to people along the way that eventually influence the end user. And maybe you do get to the end user, but you have to sell to 3 people before you get to the end user. This is how governments work a lot of times. You have to sell to the beginning person, and then they call in their management and you make a presentation to them. And then sometimes you make another third presentation to their larger group. They narrow down their alternatives. So there's an initiator who allows you in the door. Sometimes you call these people the gatekeeper. They allow you to get in the door and make a proposal. And then you move up the buying chain as we talk about that. And there's different kinds of influencers here. Think about this. Some people are totally concerned about the cost, right? And that's their role, the accountants, the financial people. Sometimes it's the technical people that are more important. Complex machinery, you're selling complex machinery. They want to know what happens if it breaks down. Can I help mitigate the problem on my own? So they have technical questions they need to ask. So think about if the coach is the person that advises, maybe they have advisors. Oh, who are you talking to about this particular contract? Maybe they have a business partner, a coach, that helps them make good buying decisions. And so that person advises them. So maybe you have to sell to the coach and give them the proposal, or all of these at the same time, right? So just kind of think about, there's lots of people, lots of influencers who could eventually help you make the sale. And if you're good at communicating, you can impact and get a yes from any of those people, right? All right, so we talked about gatekeepers, right? They control the flow of information. Can you get into the door, right? Can you get in the door for an interview? Sometimes it's hard even just to get an interview. You're looking for another job, right? Um, Sometimes you need to work within your established network to try to find out who's hiring. So bypasses the gatekeeper. Same thing in selling to a company. Sometimes you have to bypass the gatekeeper. Maybe you already have a relationship with the buying agent or the buying agent's um, assistant that you can go directly there. All right. So, and then the person making the decision, the end user, the decider, they're going to have a whole different kind of, because they know that they're the decider, they might push you harder to get concessions made on your price of your product, knowing that they're the final decision maker. Okay, so that's kind of think about that. All right. And we talk a little bit about evaluations and needs. This is kind of a good thing. I know I'm just going to wrap this up in 3 more minutes here. Factors influencing buying decisions. Just kind of think about this. Outside factors that might not be pertaining directly to you as a company, the economics of what's going on in their business. Maybe there's, like right now, a lot of inflation. There's a lot of belt tightening. Maybe they don't have a lot of extra funds. That impacts how they make a buying decision. Okay, they might have less money to spend. Impacts how you'll be able to sell to them. Maybe they have had products before that have had terrible service. The quality has been horrible. And so that impacts how they're going to make a decision. Maybe they're going to be so careful about how the next product they're going to buy or the next service because the last consultant they had did not service them very well. So they're going to be reluctant to buy from you based on that criteria. So you have to do a really good job of communicating your value there. Okay. Personal, maybe this buyer made a mistake the last time and they brought in a supplier that did not produce the products that they said they were going to. And so personally, the buyer made a mistake. So they're going to be more careful next time. Maybe gets back into the emotional intelligence. Maybe they got a problem in their family. Maybe they have a sick relative at home. And so personally, they're going to be kind of overwhelmed. Knowing that and how you deal with that impacts the buying behavior. Maybe you talk about their family. Maybe you help them work through being a sounding board for an issue that's not even related to your product, but it's related to your customer's idea about what's important to them. So you kind of see how important this all is when we talk about buying behavior. And it's within the organization. You talk about how long they're going to be buying, this life cycle. Maybe you get into the thing where they're going to be spending a lot of money, $1 million, but maybe they can talk about, well, it's going to last 10 years. And see, the last product you spent half as much, but it didn't last you 2 years. You spend more money now, it will last you 10 years. So it's a better value, better life cycle value. So everybody has different criteria. And so as you go through the needs and the level of your commitments that you're getting, right? This creeping commitment, these smaller commitments, these smaller yeses, you'll be able to do a better job of communicating and making the sale. So, whew. All right. So that's all I have for you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stay on for another 5 minutes and take questions, or however long I can stay on for another 10 minutes. If you need to jump off, that's fine. That's great, because we're done with the actual content of the class for chapters 2 and 3. But if you want to stay on and ask questions, I'm going to we'll call this like kind of extra office hours. It's the least I could do to stay on because I know we jumped on so late. But I wanted to thank you all for hanging with us, hanging with Windsor and the technical group that was able to, thank you, Samia, that were able to hang with us. Because that shows a commitment, a high level commitment on your part. And I again, I apologize for the trouble. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Obviously, can't guarantee it, right? Can't make an unethical commitment that never going to happen again. But we'll do what we have to make sure that we can service in the best possible way. Because you're our customer, right? You're our customer, and we want to make sure me as the instructor, the professor, does a good job in making sure that you get what you need. All right. So, any questions at this point? Anybody want to chime in? Yes, Samia.
Hi, Professor. Yeah, I have a question. So as we are going through the content you're sharing, this is very helpful in understanding selling at a
Yes.
in a better note, and also going through the quizzes. So my question is, in the final exam, which will be towards the end of the course, would
Yes.
those questions would be similar to the what we are answering in the quizzes, or would be like really different? We should also expect a surprise there.
Really good question to kind of be thinking ahead. Thank you, Samia. A lot of the questions in the language will be very similar. Okay, and so what I tried to do in the beginning is set you up with, you know, questions that would be very relevant in the same kind of wording language that you would be experiencing later on.
Okay.
So yes, they will be very similar. You'll find in a little bit next week and in some of the succeeding weeks, especially when we get into the assignment, some of them will be very short response where you have to write in a sentence or two. So I want you to understand that, you know, in some of the later chapters, as the material gets more, I think we'll call it relevant to what we're doing, in terms of how to make a sale, how to communicate, how to develop a presentation, how to prospect, how to sell ourselves better. What I want to give you is some ways to make that a little bit more usable for you. And so then you'll have some short answer as well in there. But yes, you're absolutely right. The language will be very similar. So if you see a question, it might actually be very similar. It probably will be very similar on the final exam. So absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much,
And
Professor.
you're very welcome. So very good question. Thank you. And again, remember next week, we'll be getting into presentation skills, and you'll kind of see how so much of selling is life skills. Like I said, communicating. And our ability to be self-aware is important too, as I said. So good. Any other questions about any of the content we covered? Like I said, I think we didn't get into everything here because I wanted to respect your time because I've kept you, and we started so late. So I will clean up the end of this chapter at the beginning of next class. So you'll have that. And we'll get into the presentation skills section, chapter 4. That's a really good one. I think, and you'll find, like I said, next week also look for the assignment as kind of a buying scenario where you're going to have to go through the 8 steps, or at least kind of think about those 8 steps. And this is a good point. I'll make this right now. Those 8 steps are really important. So they will appear on the final exam. So I'll tell you that right now. They will appear in multiple, and probably the second assignment we would do, and in the first assignment, you'll see them, because that is really critical in terms of the flow of information and how we organize our sales call, how we organize the buying cycle, how we organize getting commitments. It's important to hit all those steps or many of those steps at some point. Okay, so that's good. Any other questions about anything? All right. So again, we're meeting next Tuesday. I will see everybody 10 a.m. Eastern time, and we'll do all we can to make sure we start on time. Okay. And from that standpoint, those that had to jump off, obviously the recording is available for you. We'll clean up the last few slides next class, but that's it. That's I have. I want everybody to have a great week. You have a whole week ahead of you. You'll have a very short quiz on chapter 4, so know that, and the week that we have going ahead. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day or evening. And I'll see everybody here back again next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.